How's that, whore of yours?
She's good. Didn't reckon I should waste my time killing you. But I felt different.
So it seems. Well, maybe after all this is over, I'll go pay her a call. And the boy.
For years now, there's been one thing that just about every Red Dead fan can agree on. We all hate Micah Bell. We hate his greed and his treachery. But what if the real reason that we hate him is that he represents a terrifyingly empty idea? What if Micah wasn't just a backstabbing rat, but a man infected with a philosophical sickness that made his damnation inevitable? This is how a deep-seated belief in nothing, that of nihilism, was the true villain that doomed Micah Bell from the very start. So what exactly is Micah's problem? To understand this monster, you have to understand his worldview. Basically, Micah Bell is a nihilist. Nihilism is the total rejection of moral principles, driven by a belief that life itself is meaningless. For Micah, there's no good or evil, no honor, no loyalty, and certainly no God. There's only a brutal, simple thing: winning and losing, living and dying. This perspective is the key that unlocks his every move. He isn't playing by the same rules as the rest of the Van der Linde gang. While they, for a while at least, desperately cling to Dutch's vision of freedom and loyalty, Micah saw the whole thing as a joke. He openly mocks things and sees feelings as a weakness, and splits the world into two camps, predators and prey. In his mind, the strong take what they want, and any reason beyond that is just a fairy tale for fools. We get our first unfiltered look at Micah's philosophy and his actions early in the game. When Arthur busts him out of jail in Strawberry, Micah's first act of freedom isn't to run, it's to get his precious revolvers back. What follows isn't a calculated escape, it's an impulsive and pointless hurricane of violence. He guns down half the town almost, not because he has to, but because he enjoys it. He relishes the chaos, embodying the most brutal parts of outlaw life without any of the romantic ideals that Dutch loves to preach about. This isn't just a guy with a short fuse. This is a man completely without empathy. The Strawberry Massacre is a direct symptom of his nihilism. If you believe that nothing really matters, then why show restraint? Why spare lives that have no value? To Micah, the people of Strawberry weren't people. They were just obstacles and playthings. This shows that he's not just a criminal, but he's a vortex of self-interest that consumes everything in his path. He's not just breaking the law, he's proving his own worldview correct. Might makes right. And as the gang's fortunes spiral out of control, Micah's nihilism becomes a contagion. He's a master manipulator, and he sees the cracks forming in Dutch and his ego and exploits them perfectly. As Dutch's ideals begin to crumble under the pressure of everything going on, Micah's right there, whispering a simple and brutal alternative in his ear. He constantly feeds Dutch's paranoia, positioning himself as the only one tough enough for the world that they're in. He drives home this idea that loyalty is for suckers, compassion is a weakness, and survival is the only law. He champions the kind of high-risk, low-humanity thinking that leads to disasters, where the lives of his fellow gang members are just acceptable collateral. While Hosea and Arthur acted as somewhat of a conscience for the gang, Micah was the opposite, a complete surrender to chaos. He encouraged Dutch's worst impulses and validated his most reckless decisions and isolated him from anyone who urged caution. And this is where his nihilism does its worst damage. It doesn't just guide his own awful actions, but it dismantles the gang's foundation, the belief in something more than just money. He isn't just a bad influence, but he's a philosophical cancer that eats the gang from the inside out. We're getting into the mind of one of gaming's most hated villains, and if you enjoy this kind of analysis, consider subscribing if you would. I like to explore the philosophy of characters that stick with us for good or bad. Now we'll get back to it. So when Agent Milton finally reveals Micah was the rat, it's a shock to the characters, but for us, perhaps not. Looking at him through this lens, it's not just predictable, but it's inevitable. Micah's betrayal wasn't a tough choice he made under pressure. It was the only logical conclusion of his entire belief system. To a true nihilist, ideas like loyalty and brotherhood are just words. He says them, but then he doesn't really mean them. They're social rules to be used and exploited, not principles to die for. So, of course, he sold out the gang to save his own skin. In a world with no inherent meaning, his own life is the only thing of value. I'm not sure he ever bought into the gang's idea of family. He just saw it for what it was to him, a tool for his own gain, full of dreamers ripe for the picking. And his treachery is a perfect reflection of his worldview. He doesn't believe in the code, so he breaks it. He doesn't believe in bonds, so he snaps them. It wasn't a moment of weakness that made him a traitor. It was the strength of his convictions that nothing and no one mattered. Years later, when John, Sadie, and Charles find him on that mountain, we see the final result of a life lived for nothing. Micah has a new gang and he has the money, sitting on a mountaintop like a king, but his kingdom is just as cold and barren as his philosophy. His new crew is just a bad copy of the family that he destroyed, held together by fear, not loyalty. And the final standoff says it all. Even with everything crashing down, Micah's still laughing, taunting, and completely incapable of reflection or remorse. Why would he be? His nihilism won't let him see the ruin that he's caused, because to him, ruin is just the natural way of the world. And then comes the final moment, when Dutch, the man he corrupted so completely, is the one who puts a bullet in him. And in his last moments, Micah is totally alone, betrayed by the puppet that he thought he controlled and killed by the legacy of a family he tore apart. He dies as he lived, for nothing, with nothing, meaning nothing to anyone except as a memory of pain. His death is not a tragedy. Micah Bell wasn't just a video game villain, he was a philosophical black hole. His sickness was a soul-eating nihilism. It was this belief that life is meaningless that guaranteed his damnation. It made sure he could never form a real bond and never feel true loyalty and never find redemption. Red Dead Redemption 2 was a story about the desperate search for meaning. Arthur Morgan's beautiful tragedy is his fight to find a purpose in his final days. Micah is a perfect shadow to him, a man who sneers at the idea of meaning and rots from the inside out as a result. While Arthur dies for a purpose that becomes bigger than himself, Micah dies when the core of his own belief system is laid bare. So what do you think? Was Micah's nihilism the key to his character, or was there something else driving him? Let me know your theories in the comments. Thanks for watching.